Rama Rama Hare. 1, 2, 3. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna. Nitai Gaur Hare Bol, Hare Bol, Hare Bol, Nitai Gaur Hare Bol, Nitai Gaur Hare Bol, Hare Bol, Hare Bol, Nitai. Jai Jai Prabhupada, 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 Jai Jai Prabhupada, Jai Jai Prabhupada, Prabhupada. A lot of flies here. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Go Premananda Hari Hari Bo. Why are so many flies?
I don't know today's.
Huh?
Normally there are not so many, but today's, I don't know what. The windows were open.
I'm the Lord of the Flies here. At least Lord of something. So move a little bit, come in front. You speak English?
Yes.
You come in front. All closer. Not on my lap, but at least closer. Ladies also. It's easier, you know, I feel like a human being, surrounded by human beings. So, verse. I'm not prepared, I didn't know that I'm supposed to give class, and just developed. Yeah. Louis from? Aus? Ja, wo? An Füßen von Radha Krishna, Radha Madhava. Madan Mohan, that's what it is. I remember when they were supposed to be installed in Chantenay-Rose in France, and Prabhupada came. And there was a big sign, don't lean on the walls, because all the walls were just painted the day before. The whole temple was smelling, you know. And then Prabhupada saw the deities and said, no. They said, for Paris you have to have big deities. This is a big town. They're too small. And so then Hansa Luther took them to Germany. And that's the beginning of Radha Madan Mohan. Very beautiful. I used to be the photographer and made many pictures with filters so that I don't need flashlight. And there's some shining lamp on the cheeks of Radharani also, so to filter that out completely. There's some filters necessary. I forgot the name of the filters. And so I got perfect pictures of those at that time, but it's all gone, you know. By that time I was young, beautiful and dumb, and now I'm only dumb. That's the situation. Hare Krishna. So, let's get into the lecture. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Tatvat Visargo Janatagha Viplavo Yasmin Prati Luslokam Abadat Davatyapi Namami Antasya Yaso Kitinayat Shinvata Gayanti Grinanti Saravaha. Is a verse here? No. Then just repeat verse by verse. Tat, that, vak, vocabulary. Visarga, creation. Janata, the people in general. Aga, sins. Vipravaha, revolutionary. Yasmin, in which. Prati shlokam, each and every stanza. Aparavati, irregular composed. Api, in spite of. Namami, transcendental names. Anantasya, the unlimited Lord. Yasha, glories. Ankitani, depicted. Yat, that. Sorry, what? It is what? Shinvanti, do hear. Gayanti, do sing. Grinanti, do accept. Sadhavaha, the purified men who are honest. Translation. On the other hand, that literature which is full of descriptions of the transcendental glories of the name, form, fame, forms, pastimes, etc. of the unlimited Lord is a different creation full of transcendental words directed towards bringing about a revolution into impious life of this world's misdirected civilization. Such transcendental literature, even though imperfectly composed, are heard, sung and accepted by purified men who are thoroughly honest. Purport. Yeah, very long purport. It is a can everybody hear what I say? Is it clear? It is a qualification of the great thinkers to pick up the best even from the worst. It is said that intelligent men should pick up nectar from a stock of poison, should accept gold even from a filthy place, should accept a good and qualified wife even from an obscure family, and should accept a good lesson even from a man or from a teacher who comes from the untouchables. These are some of the ethical instructions for everyone, in every place, without exception. So, if you see that this is not followed, in Germany, that people would listen to somebody reasonable, like our philosophy is very reasonable. Religion has to be reasonable. Otherwise it is fanaticism. I mean, as a classical example, when I was 10 years old, my brother just had died, and the priest came, the body was lying in a coffin in the house, as is a habit in Catholic religion. One room is set aside, and the body is lying there. And the priest came, in black, Catholic priest. And I asked a reasonable question. The reasonable question is, Father, why did my brother have to suffer like this? He had brain tumor, 3 operations. Cutting, like circular cut. Because like if they use a circular saw, cut, take a piece out, close it. And again, after some time, open it up, same saw, 3 times in a row. It was unbearable. My mother never recovered. She stayed with Jesus. She didn't become an atheist because she was a very pious person, but she never recovered from the grief. She grieved herself to death, youngest child. So this question was very reasonable, and he said, I don't know. I can't answer this question. And I said, but in the Bible, I passed forward, I said, in the Bible it says everyone reaps what he sows. If you sow an apple seed, there is expected to be an apple coming out. If you sow pear seed, pear seed, And he said, I really can't answer this question. And then I mumbled under my breath. I didn't dare to be very loud about it. I said, Father, you just made me an atheist. Because there's only one conclusion. In the presence of a God who is omniscient, that means he knows everything, omnipresent, he's everywhere, and all-powerful, omnipotent, how is this world going on? Is he sitting just on his asasan there and says, all right, it's nice to see this guy is killed in a death, in a war, and this guy is being hanged right now. This one. where's God in all this? This is the question. And my conclusion was, as a 10-year-old, in my little Western mind, there's no God. It can't be. It's just by chance, random. Somebody has everything, somebody has nothing. That's a reasonable conclusion. And only when I read later, this 15, I read a German author's book, Hermann Hesse's book, Siddhartha, about one of the associates of Buddha. And he explained, just like in generally people believe in my future life, I'm getting the results of this life. In the same way, this life is nothing but the resultant actions of a past life. Right? That's the reason. When I saw there was like a beam of light had hit my head. I said, that's it. That's it, because I was not impious. I was raised in a very pious family. I said, that's it, that makes sense. And so this is the first time that Western religiosity, because this problem is not just a Catholic problem or Protestant problem, it's a Muslim problem, it's a Jewish problem. There is no answer to this question. There was a tsunami in Japan about 4 or 5 years ago, and there was a teleconference worldwide, like a kind of Zoom conference, modern Zoom conference. And so people called in from all over the world, and there was one girl from Japan. She called, and she was obviously Japanese, you could see it, but her name was Helena. I understood, she's a Christian. And she said, Holy Father, 7 years old, all my friends are dead. Why does God allow this? And he says, I asked the same question, and there's no answer. We don't know the answer. And that's shocking, because, he's the head of 3 billion people. This is an answer that every common man in India can tell you what it is. Every rickshawala knows that. Why the people suffer. Because it's just space, there's no knowledge. Knowledge of the soul. If there's no knowledge of the soul, and the soul is eternal, Krishna says, never was a time that I do not exist. One who dies, birth is certain. One who is born, death is certain. The whole Bhagavad Gita, you read the 2nd chapter and you're completely clear about the nature of the soul. But there's no defined, you have to understand this and take this with you. There's no defined understanding of the nature of the soul in Abrahamic. These 3 religions are called Abrahamic because they're all following Abraham, Father Abraham. So in Abrahamic religion, means Christian religion or Muslim religion or Jewish religion, there's no defined concept of soul. They think that the soul is born at the time of conception. And that our real father is our earthly father. He's a father. He's at the beginning. He creates us. And so when I asked the question one time to a Catholic Jesuit priest, I said, now, it says in the Bible, our Father who's in heaven. He says, obviously we are also the children of God. How does that work? And he says, because we are not children of God, we are children of our Father. But, and here's a theological conclusion, we have no Father in heaven. Like Jesus said, follow no one but your Father in heaven, We have no Father in heaven. We are actually the children of our Father, but we become adopted by God as His children. We are adopted sons. And that's, of course, a little bit like this, That's far-fetched, as you can say. It's just a theological concept that doesn't mean anything in the eyes of knowledge. It's just some human concept, to make it work. There's a false conception there, and to make that work, they go like this. We are the adopted sons of God. It's a Catholic has to believe that. And therefore, even the Pope of Rome, he may even know more. But he can't say it because he's bound by doctrine. And it's interesting in this discussion, he said, Elena, he said, I have the same questions and we don't have the answer, but Jesus also, he was innocent. No, Jesus also was innocent and you are innocent, blah, 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 blah. And Jesus is always with you and he will help you and don't worry about it. He's a real God, etc. And I know the sadness will not go away, but Jesus will save you. And maybe at the end he will even understand why it is so. And I said, that's right. He's right. You go into the next temple and buy yourself for $5 a Bhagavad Gita, read the second chapter, and you're all set. Is that simple? Is that simple, right? Because in the Bhagavad Gita, every word is breathing of knowledge. And so the idea is interesting. Sanatana Goswami asked Lord Chaitanya this question, two questions. He said, number one, who am I? And the next question, why I'm suffering. You have to analyze this. Why he asked the first question, who am I? Because unless you know who you are, namely that you are a spiritual soul, you cannot know why you're suffering. That's the initiating question. That's why he asked this question. He knew better. He's a great saint. He wrote so many books. Why did he ask this question? Not for you, not for him. He was not ignorant and was in need of knowledge. He asked it for you and me. Like Arjuna, he puts himself in a position of an ignorant person. For you and me, we should sit up when we hear this, why I'm suffering. Because the answer is, who am I? That's the first question we have to sort out. So the first question in our scriptures is, Aham Brahmasmi, that I'm Brahman. That's the first point. It's the ABC, Without ABC, you cannot read any Shakespeare, nothing, Like 1 and 1 is what? Very intelligent. 1 and 1 is 2. So if your conclusion is 1 and 1 is 3, right, then your whole calculation, even if you calculate for thousands of years, is built on a false foundation. It's based on a false foundation. And so the idea that I'm the body, your whole philosophy is based on a false foundation. The premise of your theory is wrong, right there. You see? And there's a verse even in this regard. Just find it out for you. Give me a moment. Very clearly explained in our scripture, this very point, what is the foundation of our knowledge? Give me a second. It's too good to hear. You can't miss it. It's just a great verse in this regard. And no, go back. Here. Brahmasya anusmiti sthitam, etc. When one deviates from his original consciousness as soul, right? When we deviate from that, he loses the capacity of remember his previous position in past life, or actually in his previous position as a servant of God in the spiritual world. He loses his conception of who he is. He loses capacity to remember his previous position or recognize his present one. He thinks, I'm a German, I'm an American, I'm a Hindu, I'm a Muslim, I'm black and white, Mr. Smith and Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn Monroe. When this occurs, learned scholars consider the soul to be lost. In ignorance, in the material world, And if you go down this path, no matter how millions of births, if that's your premise that I'm Michael Jackson, or we have one of our devotees, Rohini Kumar, distributed books in Dublin, Ireland. And he gave this person, there was a person with a spectacle, black spectacle, and he gave him this book. He said, what do I need this for? He said, you should read it, it's good. Don't you know who I am? He said, no. He said, I'm Bono. He said, so Bono takes his book. You don't understand who I am? I said, you're Bono, but just take this book. He said, I don't need that. That means he's fool number one. Right? He may be a great musician, and he is. And I had a row with him, actually. When that group was very young, they were playing in a kind of Saturday market. There was a little stage. And they were playing. No, I didn't know them. They were just young kids, college kids, or even before. And he said, "You people haven't used a bad verse. Well off, you know." And I said, "The same to you. We are here as much as you are here." So that was my rundown with him. And you see, this is all false ego. You know, false ego. The whole world is based on false ego. I'm this, I'm that. You know, it's like milk is pure. If you put lemon in it, it's not anymore milk. So in the same way, if you put into the consciousness of a pure soul the idea of I, me, and mine, I am the body, and me is where I am, the famous Prithu Das, Srila Prithu Das. and my parents are like this, I'm German American. This is all nonsense. It's complete nonsense. I'm not. Jivera Swarupa Nitya Krishna Das, Lord Chaitanya explains it very clearly. The soul is an eternal servant of God. And if you want to serve God, then you have to serve the material world. You have to serve society, you have to serve communism, capitalism, and whatnot. And your dog, ultimately, you know, or you have a cat. I saw one time, first time I came to America, I came out of the airport waiting for my son to pick me up. There was a huge car, American car, was stopping on the other side, big Cadillac, stretched. And a woman came out, went to the back, and the back door opened the door, was a little dog coming out. You know? And she went with the dog behind, there was a tree there, and he pooped. And she took a little tissue out of her bag, out of the diamond bag or whatever it was, and cleaned him. And then the dog jumped into the bag, and the dog, the window was open. He had a big grin. He looked at me with a big grin on his face, you know. I never forget that, you know. So this is Bob Dylan sang this song. If you don't want to, you have to serve somebody. If you don't want to serve God, if you don't want to serve, you have to serve the devil. But you have to serve somebody. So really, he got a very good idea. Where to get it from? From Vasudeva Das, Brahmachari, the disciple of Prabhupada, who was living in his house and painted the ceilings. Our Vasudeva from Hamburg. He stayed with him, with Bob Dylan, and he preached to him. He told him that you have to serve somebody. That's a good idea. You got to either serve God or you got to serve the devil, but you have to serve somebody. That's our philosophy. You know? So, Aham Brahmasmi, that's the first instruction. Give him knowledge. Namely, I am a soul. That's the first thing. Whereas in the material world, people say, I am the body. Right? I'm the body. And I'm this, I'm that. And this is mine. The first word a child speaks, when a little child opens his lips the first time, what does he say? Mama. Everything is mine. What's the next word? Papa. Sin. I'm caused by sin. you see. And from childhood, they learn I, me, and mine. In kindergarten, this is my toy. No, it is my toy. Give me that toy. I mean, they start fighting with each other, you know, like Putin is fighting with Ukraine. And the whole world is a kindergarten on LSD, basically speaking. You know, it's just ridiculous, you know, fighting over something that they don't own. And there's no conception of you. Krishna never heard, of course he heard, but there's no conception of I'm a Ukrainian or I'm a Russian if you have knowledge. And that's what's missing, knowledge. One who's enlightened with the knowledge by which nations is destroyed, Krishna says, that knowledge reveals everything, like the sun reveals everything in the daytime. Beautiful verse, knowledge. One time Prabhupada, when he came to Germany, and I happened to be the translator in this discussion, so there was a professor, there was a Christian professor, Father Porsche, from the University of Frankfurt. I had been a university boy. I could walk around in the universities pretty easy, and I got him to see Prabhupada. So Prabhupada asked him the question he always would ask. Number one question, what is your philosophy? Because otherwise you don't know who you're talking to. Sometimes somebody comes into the door, you come into the door and you meet an enthusiastic brahmachari who just joined 3 days ago, and he will talk to you for half an hour. And then he asks you, did you understand? He said, I don't understand English. Right? Because he didn't ask first some initiating questions. Who are you, where you come from? I always do it, so that you can understand who you're talking to, right? But in our enthusiasm, we talk. And ultimately, it goes in here and out there. So he asked this question, what is your philosophy? And he said, well, Jesus died for our sins. And he's the light and the truth of the world, and nobody comes to the Father but through me. And Prabhupada I've heard these things since childhood in church, right? The same old thing. And so none of it are the words of Jesus. This is Jesus' rest. This is an interpretation of Jesus by Paul and company, you know? No doubt about it. It's not theology, it's politics by the end of the day. You know, it's politics. So, where did I get stuck?
What is your philosophy?
Huh?
Question Srila Prabhupada asked.
See, this is called a senior moment when you get old. It's a senior moment. To express it gently and politely. Prithu Das had a senior moment. So in any way, so what was that?
You were translating
Huh?
Srila Prabhupada.
Yeah, he asked what is your philosophy. So the man presented a classical Christian standard philosophy, and Prabhupada yawned after some time. The professor understood that he was falling asleep. And so he asked Prabhupada, what do you think of this? Because Prabhupada didn't say anything. There was a long silence in the room. And we were all kids like in your age. I was 25, you know. And so all these kids are sitting there, and we are waiting for Prabhupada. He doesn't say anything. Finally he said, it was like thunder, you know, like the Lord on the mount, was it Abba mountain in Israel. He said, 2,000 years have passed. There was a big silence. And still you don't understand Jesus. So the professor, PhD, he was shocked to hear this. He couldn't believe his ears. And so he said, why you say that? He said, because if you understand Krishna, if you understand Jesus, you can understand Krishna. And if you understand Krishna, you understand Jesus. And if you say you want to love Jesus, you must also love the Father. Jesus is love your Lord. You have to love the Father. And if you love the Father, you love automatically the Son. And if you say, I want to love only Jesus and not Krishna, probably that means you have no knowledge. Bang. Cut. You know? That was it. And that's the thing. There is no real knowledge, no aham brahmasmi, nothing of those. No defined understanding of the soul. You read Bhagavad Gita, you get it's a very good course. The second chapter is sufficient to explain exactly what the position is of the soul, who we are. And because we don't know in the material world who we are, therefore we want to be somebody else. You know, in fashion, I remember in our time, Elvis Presley was in, we had leather jackets and we had red socks and black pants, and, you know, we were standing in front of a mirror and get that haircut like this with foam in your head. You know, we were all kids, you know, because we wanted to be somewhere else, somebody else. We wanted to be Elvis Presley. And in the same way now, young people in India particularly, they run around with this haircut that they shave their sides. And they look like pineapples, basically speaking. It's a pineapple haircut, right? Or people wear the hat the other way around, right? Why is that? Why do people? Very simple. There's history to it. In Los Angeles, California. A teacher, the boy had this typical cat, in typical hat, the basketball hat, you know. This is what you call the shiam, is in front, and the teacher couldn't see his face. He said, "You take that hat off." He said, "Why? I can't see your face." The guy said, "All right." He turned the hat around. The whole class turned up and turned all the hat around. It became a hit. And from that time, everybody wears his hat like this. Nobody knows why. Prabhupada gives the example. There was a washerman, and his donkey died. And he shaved his head, because that's what people do when some family member dies. And so people ask him, "Why you shaved your head?" "Well, Sabal Singh died." This was the name of the donkey. So everybody starts shaving his head, asking, "Why are you doing it?" "Sabal Singh died." "Oh," shaved his head. So finally it came to the minister. The minister said, "Sabal Singh died. My God, I have to shave my head." He shaved his head. The king said, "Why are you shaving your head?" "Sabal Singh died." He said, "Who's Sabal Singh? Who's Sabal Singh? Who's Sabal Singh? Who's Sabal Singh?" Finally it came out, it was the donkey of a washerman, you know. So this is how people are. They want to be somebody else, you know. They want to be, there's a group in this regard. It's quite interesting what they say. It is, what was the verse? Foundation. There it is. There's a group, it's called the Jets. It's an Australian rock group. As sang a song, you tried to, and it was dedicated to this Kurt Cobain, who committed suicide, this famous rock musician. And as they wrote for him, "You tried so hard to be someone else, and you forgot who you are." And that's what it is. If you try to be somebody else, you know, the whole world is like this. When it's hard to be yourself, it's not to be somebody else, you know. I found this very interesting, that is humanity in search of identity. If you don't have a spirit, if you don't know your spiritual identity, the whole fashion is dressing like this, doing like this, looking in the mirror, this way, that way, that way. It is all a symptom of an identity crisis of humanity. They don't know who they are. They think they're the body. And so by changing the body, they want to change into something else, facing themselves almost to death, to be slim and beautiful, and the whole world is obsessed by the idea to be beautiful. Right? Particularly, you know. And men are attracted to that, you know. Men are attracted to beauty. Why does a man marry a woman, mostly beauty, and then also he wants to have a nurse when he's getting old? Why does a woman marry a man? For beauty? Not really. For the purse. Because purse means security, right? They want to have no father is going to in India give her daughter to somebody who has no money, a hippie on the street. There's no such a thing. My father, even in a very conservative family, when all his three sisters wanted to marry one boy, he said, "I'll bring this boy." And my father said, "No, let me look in your checkbook. How much money you have?" I said, "Well, I'm a student." He said, "All right, you can get what do you call it, engaged. That is okay, but first finish your study, get a job, and then come back to me and show me a checkbook. And when the checkbook is all right, you can marry my daughter." Right? Right? Common sense. So all these things are common sense. But Prabhupada said in the West, common sense is not common. That's what Prabhupada said. And every Indian, you can ask them this question, like in the West, yes. But you think people have common sense? They say, no, they have no common sense. You know? In the basic questions of human life, you know? Common sense. Even when somebody joins, I remember I went on Sankirtan with a young boy, young brahmachari, and we were sitting in our Sankirtan van, and I had to go to, which is called number 1, I had to go to the bathroom. This is number 2 is the bigger That's number two. Number one, in Indian school, you never mention. Teacher said, why I want to go out? And teacher understands. This is a polite way indicating that you have to go. Number two is more serious. He said, do you have a towel? Because he has to take a shower, right? So I went out of my van and number one. There was a little bush there, 20 yards before the van. He was looking at me. And so I did that one and washed my, it had just rained, I washed my hands and went. So he watched me and did number one. Then he took the urine and put it into a seeker. The urine. He put the urine into a seeker. He said, are you out of your mind? He said, I do the same that you do. He said, not exactly. I'm washing my hands and he puts the urine. Now in all of India, that's why I'm bringing this up, you don't find one person, whether he's Muslim or Christian, who would do that. It's so unthinkable because they were trained from childhood on and you have to wash your hands, after one or two. Right? Mataji, you from India? Yeah? No. Local.
I'm
From?
from Chile.
Chile, yeah. Have you ever ridden on a llama? Have you ever ridden on a llama? They have llamas, no? These big animals, it's beautiful.
Oh, yes.
Did you sit on top of them? Did you travel on a llama?
Alpacas. No, yes, but I don't live at that place.
So in any case, let's get back to the subject. This is the essential question of human life. Who am I? Wer bin ich? Who am I? Find yourself. Selbsterkennen is the erste Weg zur Besserung. In Germany it says self-realization is the first. When you hit yourself with a hammer on your thumb, your friend says, and I said, I'm just a fool, you're foolish. I said, Selbsterkennen is the erste Weg zur Besserung. No? But there's a deep meaning in this sentence. This is actually the truth. The erste way, if you want to change from material life to spiritual life, you have to have self-realization. There's always deep meaning in these words we have in these, but people don't understand it, what it means. Selbsterkenntnis. So people want to be themselves. And there was a huge poster. I came into Omsk, Russia, Siberia airport. I came into what was it, the reception hall or departure hall, whatever. The gigantic poster, something like 50 yards long. There was a man sitting on a lake, smoking cigarette, and it says, be yourself. It was an advertisement for Camel cigarettes. So as soon as everybody thinks, as soon as I smoke these cigarettes, I be myself. You see, that is very graphic. If you keep your eyes open, the material nature, you can see all this stuff right in front of you. You see all this stuff right in front of you. It's left and right, and people don't see it. Because as Jesus said, they have eyes and do not see, they have ears and do not hear. That's the thing. It's obvious. Why? I mean, the answer to why my brother died is so obvious. That everyone reaps what he sows. Yes, what does it mean? What has he sown? I asked the priest. He was just a child. How could he reap something? He says, I don't know. When there was a pope, the present pope, he visited a hospital for cancer children with their parents. And he said, when I see these children, I look at the cross, and it is a direct quotation. I look at the cross and said, Lord, why? Why are you doing this? And I have no answer. There you have it. It makes for good preaching. If you meet somebody who's little, you can ask him this. I have one question to you. Why do the innocent suffer? There's no answer. He said, I can tell you the answer. And if he's open-minded, he said, that's very interesting, that makes sense. And if he's a close person, Ramos, who knows nothing, he said, that's not true. That's not true. Right? He doesn't know what it is, but if you answer, it's not. If you tell a Christian, God, he said, no, I don't know. It looks like a sailor. This is God. This is God. It's like you have never eaten pizza, Mataji. I ask you, have you eaten pizza? No, in this case, you're playing a person who doesn't. Have you eaten pizza? Do you know how pizza looks like? No. Do you know how pizza smells? This is pizza. And you say, no, that's not pizza. This is logic. People have no knowledge of God. If you say, this is God, they say, there is no God. One time I had an argument on book distribution, and there was a boy who I challenged. I said, who's God for you? He said, I don't know. And he said, and you know how to God? I said, yes, I know. I looked at my Bhagavatam they were selling, and there was a picture of Lord Hayagriva, the horse incarnation. I said, that is God. He ran away. I'm sure for the rest of his life he tells his friends the Hare Krishna, they're worshipping a horse. You know? Like I had this marriage here in this room. There was a Christian priest, daughter, marrying a Hare Krishna devotee, Satyaraj. And so I understood. He told me my father-in-law was a Protestant priest. So I talked in a very, how do you say, interconfessional way of explaining the similarities. To worship in the name of God. Jesus is loving your neighbor. Excuse me. You should praise the Lord or the name of the Lord. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be thy name. And so he woke up a little bit, when he saw the similarities, And so after the sacrifice, he came to me and said, I want you, we were standing here. He said, I want you so much, thank you so much. This was very, how do you say, giving me peace, because I was, for weeks, I and my wife, we were mentaling, can we as Christians allow ourselves, in a Christian conscience, to sit in front of a pagan idol? Can we reconcile this with our consciousness? And now I feel a little bit relieved from your explanation. He said, I have only one question. He came close to me and said, are you worshipping a cat? He said, are you worshipping a cat? I said, that's not a cat. I said, God has many forms, and this form is because of this and that. And I showed him the pictures there how Prahlad was tortured, and how the God had no choice but to take this, to make true the vow of Lord Brahma. Explained to him, and he was relieved. And so you see the ignorance in the Western countries as far as spirituality is concerned is so deep, it's just unbelievable, that even myself, I'm walking over the street in Munich with my 77 or 76 years, and the taxi driver pulls down his window and says, get a job, du alte Haarschlampe. Get a job, you old harshhead, And when we had Kirtan in Munich, on the main street there at Alexander, was a place called, a famous place in Munich. Marienplatz. We're sitting there, and so one Bavarian farmer with leather pants and Loden and buttons of hirsch head and Gamsbart, he looked at us like this for a long time. And then I asked him, do you like that? He said, hören Sie doch bloß auf mit Ihrem Negerjatz. Hören Sie bloß auf mit Ihrem Negerjatz, That was his conception. This is a Negro jazz or something. So the ignorance of, in particular Western people, they're not sensitive. They're very arrogant. They think they know everything, and therefore everything that doesn't fit into their small, tiny vision is a schmuck. Like Jewish people would say, schmuck, it's nonsense. And therefore they cannot understand this movement. Not possible. Some look at the soul. Krishna says, some describe him as a soul. Some look at the soul as amazing. Some describe the soul as amazing. Some hear of him as amazing. And others cannot understand. And these are the people in the West. They cannot understand. Due to impiousness, they cannot understand. You cannot understand God if you're impious. Only by undivided devotion can I be understood as I am standing before you, Krishna says. We don't have access to God unless there's some piety. God can everybody, He can give everybody transcendental vision in a second. You know, Arjuna said, I give you, he has this sincere desire. Arjuna said, I would like to see your universal form. That Krishna said, yes. Only by undivided devotion. And he gave me, said, I give you here. Krishna could see the universal form. Krishna can do this. But we have to be qualified. You have to be qualified. You can't go in a company and say, I want to see the boss. Well, who are you? Well, I work in a tool department. So, working in a tool department, you can't see the, you don't have any qualifications to see the dog, the god, right? The chief, the top man. But if somebody works himself up and becomes more and more qualified, that he ultimately joins middle management, and then because he's smart, he ultimately becomes even the member of the board. Then you can see God, the manager, the top man, in the penthouse all the time, no problem. It requires qualification. So people are unqualified, they are too sinful to understand God. Too sinful. And what was that? Oh, he misses. How can you be so cruel? You take him out of, he doesn't hear all that nectar that is emanating from my lotus lips. So in any case, this is the first thing that struck me when I read this verse, you know, that an intelligent man picks nectar from a stalk of poison. Accept gold from a filthy place, should accept a good and qualified wife even from an obscure family, and should accept a good lesson from a man or a teacher who comes from an untouchable background. That's intelligence. The people are not intelligent, you know. They're like some...
Sorry, there is also transmission and you always pushing like back microphone.
Yeah, that's my problem.
Yeah, it's a heavy problem. It's our problem.
I have to have a microphone this way, you know. You're going to buy... You agree I need a thing like that?
I was thinking about it. Why then?
Will you buy me one?
Yes.
Thank you. Case closed. It's true, because I do this all the time. I have this problem everywhere as people come complaining. We don't understand, we don't hear you properly. So in any case, you see, we have to take knowledge from a perfect master. That knowledge that comes out of our head doesn't mean anything. You know, Jiva Goswami is explaining there are 3 ways of knowing, famous from the what is it, Tattva Sandarbhas. 3 ways of knowing. One is by direct perception, by sense perception, right? Like the sun is now rising, and it's about the size of a pancake from our vision. It's nice, warm in the morning, and red in the evening by sense perception. It is white and unbearable in India. You cannot even imagine. I was in Vrindavan, it's 55 degrees, as a boy from Germany. So I called the company, I bought a full-size freezer. And I put a blanket in it, and I lay myself into the freezer, pulled the lid, and I had somebody sitting in front of them, put the watch on that he would not fall asleep. I said, hey, look at me after 10 minutes before I'm an ice block. But, so the sun is, in this example, by sense perception, it's unbearable at noon. In the evening, it is wonderful again, red. That's just by sense perception. Now it's called pratyaksha, direct perception. Direct perception of the senses. By the skin, you feel the sun is very warm, you know, or too hot, you know. By the eyes, you see this, and by the, etc. So, that's called pratyaksha, direct perception. Then the next way of knowing is called anumana. Anu means to follow, and mana means you follow the mind. In my opinion, it is this. In my opinion, it is that. That's, you know, and research belongs in the field of anumana. You even scientists research, because you research, try to understand something while your instruments are imperfect. If your instruments are imperfect, right, and they are imperfect, mind is not perfect. No living entity is perfect in this world. Krishna says that. You know that every, it's in the 17th chapter, every human being is imperfect. Even the Pope of Rome belongs into this category, although it is understood for Christians that he is infallible. Krishna says every living entity is fallible, and only in the spiritual world people are infallible. You know, so if we are fallible, and therefore whatever conclusions we are come to are imperfect. Therefore, it is ultimately the tools are imperfect. You cannot see properly. I don't have my spectacles on, and I read this and that. You know, but it's not there. It's not true. Somebody was in our temple in Vrindavan was giving a lecture on Narendra Modi. I mean, somehow they went into the subject of Narendra Modi, and I didn't have my hearing aid there. I hear 10% here, maybe 50 or 60% here, but with my hearing aid. So I asked my godbrother, I said, why is he talking about Narendra Modi the whole class? He talks about Narendra Modi, he talks about Narada Muni. You know, because the senses are imperfect. I thought he was talking about Narendra Modi. He was talking about Narada Muni. So in any case, so that is also imperfect, you know, speculation. I think, in my opinion, one devotee said, Srila Prabhupada, sometimes I'm thinking, and Prabhupada said, don't do that. You know, because he knew it was speculation, right? And so then these two paths, they're called the ascending paths, that you try by your own capacity to understand reality. It's called the ascending path. Avaroha Panta. Ava means avatar, descending. And then, Aroha Panta. By your own, the ascending path, you try to understand by your own mind, by your own intelligence, reality. Then there's Avaroha Panta, and that is accepted, and that is called Shabda Brahma, by hearing from authoritative sources, and which is basically breaks down in three things, in Guru, Shastra, and Sadhu. These are the three. Guru, Shastra, and Sadhu. We can understand what is reality, you know? And the center of the three, of this triad, these three elements, is always Shastra. Shastra. There is a saying, the elephant, what was it? It was a beautiful saying, the king sees through the nose, through the spice, right? He sends out spice. Putin knows exactly what Mr. Biden is thinking, right? He knows. CIA, in the same way the CIA is everywhere. Their eyes are everywhere, their ears are everywhere, and this is where the CIA exists. It's a fact. There was one devotee, he did something very bad, and he presented himself as such and such brahmachari, and I heard from my wife, she had read in a paper, ISKCON paper, that he was actually such and such, another person. And I said, when I heard that, I asked him after work, I said, you are involved in this case, whatever it was. He said, yeah. I said, you have to go. He said, I'm not going to call the cops on you. It was a crime. He said, I'm not going to call the cops on you. I don't do that, but you got to go. I don't want to have a scandal in my temple that we're harboring somebody who killed somebody, basically speaking. And so he went from there to, what was it, to Thailand or something. So he was there, and then he took a train to the next country next to it. What is that? Next to Thailand, what is it? Next to, where's Singapore? What is the next state? Anyway, we went on a train trip from one state to another, and two scruffy-looking hippies arrived with the pants broken, and sat with him, and he said, you know how to play cards? He said, yes. He said, okay, let's play cards. And so, in the middle of the train trip, the ticket collector came, looked at the tickets, and he said something to the young man, and the young man said, "Are we already in the other land?" He said, "Yes." And this boy said, "You're under arrest. You're from the CIA." They arrested him. Within seconds, he was the train stopped in a completely unknown place. There was already a Humvee waiting and shifted him to a plane. 8 hours later, he was in New York in prison. So the king sees through his spies. CIA is everywhere, KGB everywhere, king. The cow sees through the nose. When you touch the cow, she will sniff it like this immediately, you know. And why are here, when you go on the fields, where cows are grazing, why are there all these little spots which are the best green grass is growing there? Why is that? Why? And they don't touch it. Why? Why is it green? Because in the year before, a cow passed through there. Therefore, it is so green. And they can smell that. They won't eat it in this year. They're saying, "I'm not going to eat you now, but I know next year is another year. I'm going to take you right there." Cows see through the nose. That's the way how they perceive. The sage sees through Scripture, through the eyes of Scripture. He can understand. And the fool, he sees through his mind and senses and cannot understand. You know, we cannot understand the reality. Even if you go to Mount Kailash, the place of Lord Shiva, in Tibet, two of our Swamis went. What do they see? They see an inhospitable mountain, very beautiful, Mount Kailash, very cold, and that's all they see. But that is also real, but that's only this much of the iPhone. It's just a small corner of it. It's not the full reality. The actual reality is Lord Shiva sitting on Mount Kailash on a banyan tree 800 miles high, 800 miles across, in great gravity on a deer skin, and Sanat, all the Kumaras are there, and there's beautiful mountains and the waterfalls, and this is actually the full thing of the iPhone. It's the only little chapter of it. So in our reality, due to a lack of impiety, our vision is very restricted. Our ability to understand reality is restricted. We cannot see. If you go to Vrindavan, there's a saying, you can't buy a ticket to Vrindavan, right? There's a saying, we cannot buy a ticket to Vrindavan. What does that mean? You can go there. Every time I buy a ticket, I go all the time. Next week, I'll be there. But it means you see only of Vrindavan very little. The actual truth is that the spiritual world is there. You know, Krishna is there. Rupa Goswami sat under a tree. There was a little swing there that all the people had made. He was sitting there, and this swing was made out of stone. He was sitting there, and all of a sudden I heard some beautiful singing and laughing and enjoying his spirit. Looked up, the tree was hundreds of meters high, and there was a huge ship, a swing in the form of a fish, golden fish. And he saw Krishna and Radharani and all the gold devotees enjoying the ride. You see? That's the actual reality. And this, what we see, is just a shadow of that reality. It's just a little bit. You know? You have not, like if you make a photo of somebody's rear end, he has no pants on. You make a photo, but it's not that you know the man, that you met the man, you just met his rear end. So we are getting only a very small section of reality with pratyaksha and anumana. You know, very small. It's also real, but it's at the same time not the whole thing. And so by Krishna consciousness, by listening to Shastra, Guru Shastra, etc., you learn to know the whole thing, what's actually going on. Right from the start, you learn that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When Saraswati, the daughter of Shyamasundar, was asked by Prabhupada, he said, small, he said, Saraswati, who is Krishna? Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He has perfect knowledge. Perfect knowledge. So we know from Scripture from Brahma, Shabda Brahma, we hear, like the Lord Brahma, he tene Brahma Hridaya Adhikavaya Mohantyat Surya. He heard through the heart. Krishna gave him transcendental knowledge through the heart, you know. This is how we know. That is knowledge, everything else is ignorance. It's a very limited understanding. Like basically speaking, people are says in Bhagavatam, people are asses and cows, you know. They have no knowledge. Yet they think they're great personalities, this and that, you know. Pratyaksha doesn't work. There's one verse in Bhagavad Gita, of course, where it says Raja Vidyam, Raja Guyam. Raja Vidyam, the greatest knowledge, Raja Guyam, which is the most secret. Raja Vidya, Raja Guyam, Pavitam idam uttamam. It is the highest activity, Pavitam, pure, idam uttamam, the highest purity. Pratyaksha vagamam dhamyam, because it reveals direct knowledge of the self. That pratyaksha is on a different level. That's sense perception through the transcendental senses. You can experience Krishna. Your senses have to be transcendental. That pratyaksha, direct perception, you have in the spiritual world. You can see God. You can talk with God. You know, this is what Prabhupada told us. This is actually the reality of a great saint. For him, Krishna is a friend. If you know Sakya Rasa, Krishna is his friend. That Krishna is his friend, but you have to be extremely qualified. And all our acharyas who have that depth of realization, if you ask them, do you know Krishna? They say, I'm just a poor man, what can I know? They're very humble about it. And when I said, if you go to the spiritual world, what would you like to be? They say, I would like to be a blade of grass or an atom at Krishna's lotus feet. They're so humble. Yet this famous Mahesh Yogi, when he died, they asked him, what will you do on the other side? He said, I will shake hands with Krishna. So immediately we can understand he's a fool number 2, not even number 1. It's foolish to say such a thing, you know. We want to be dasa, 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 and dasa. In this context, we don't want to shake hands with God. We want to just be somewhere, happy to be an atom here in Krishna's kingdom, right? So this is how we have to learn. We have to read these scriptures very carefully. And I'm sorry, we have 2 pages here extra to read. And a quarter, and we didn't even go there. From this little thing, you can learn so much. You can learn so much. If you think, you have to use your brain and try to understand what Prabhupada is saying. The Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, is breathing of knowledge. Prabhupada told us, you know, that I'm in these books. I can never die. I'm in these books. And one of my godbrothers, what's his name? Chandramoli Swami. He is reading Prabhupada's books every day, 3 hours, 4 hours sometimes, loud. And he told me, he said, I had an incredible experience. I was reading Bhagavatam, purport, and all of a sudden, I felt the atmosphere had changed, something happening here. And then you heard Prabhupada's voice coming in and reading where this boy had stopped for 10 minutes, just 2 years ago. And the voice became less and less and less. Because Prabhupada, he reasons in who thinks that Vaishnava dies. He is wrong if he thinks the Vaishnava dies while he's living still in sound. So if you want to associate with Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, you associate with Krishna directly in the very moment you chant. If you're conscious, if you're spaced out, you're not really there. You think of your girlfriend or whatever, or Facebook or whatever, you know. But if you chant Hare Krishna, I know you are here. Krishna, you're here in your name. I'm in the presence of you right now by chanting his name. You're actually in Krishna's presence, and your mind is thinking like that. In the same way, if you read Bhagavatam, the Bhagavatam you associate with Prabhupada, because Prabhupada is not that. And I myself had this experience also when I was a young devotee. When Prabhupada left his body, I was in the room and had to sing for him. And so when he left, the last words he said, 2 last words. One last word was that he asked for medicine, and the disciple gave him medicine, his servant, and Prabhupada said, did you close the bottle? He said, no, Srila Prabhupada, I forgot. And then Prabhupada said, that is your mistake. He said, all of you. You know how to open bottles, you don't know how to close them. You start so many new things, and you don't see the consequences. Like the whole world, scientists, let's open this bottle, that bottle. The whole environmental catastrophe is nothing but opening bottles. You know how to open bottles, you don't know how to close it. They don't know how to get rid of the environmental situation. Whole life, you're just opening bottles without knowing the consequences. And then he said, later on, he said, everything moving and non-moving, there's nothing but Krishna. This consciousness is called Krishna consciousness. And when you think about that, there's nothing but Krishna, there's a verse. I have to read to you, it's just too good to be true. Where would I find this verse? 1 second, give me a moment. It is distress. That is a word I have to use. Distress. In distress. Prabhupada said, when all a human being sees distress, he sees it outside God's jurisdiction. He cannot understand that Krishna comes to us in happiness and distress. This is all Krishna. There's nothing but Krishna. Why does he do that? So that we become hungry for him. If you associate with somebody, right, very nice, and he goes away and you become hungry for him, you want more. But he doesn't come. Why? Because he wants you to become hungry. Then he comes back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, like a tiger is being trained in a circus. A new tiger arrives, the trainer gives him a huge feast, and then he runs away. It doesn't come for 1 month. The tiger, where is this guy? Finally he comes and another feast, and then he disappears again for months. And so after back and forth a couple of times, the tiger will eat out of his hand. The tiger wouldn't attack him because you don't bite the hand that feeds you, right? So in the same way, Krishna is taming us, going through happiness and distress. These are just ways to train the tiger human being to eat out of the hand of Krishna, to become civilized, namely transcendently situated, And then in this purpose, Prabhupada said, when a devotee is in distress, he sees the Lord has appeared as distress, just to relieve the purity of the devotee from the contamination of the material world. This is for our own good, that we have experienced distress, we become purified. And then he says, the appearance of distress is a negative process intended to give a devotee relief from the material world. Why is it a negative process? Because it just deals with your karma. What is a positive process to become free from karma? Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Rama. This is the positive process. More sins are forgiven by chanting Krishna's name than you can possibly commit in a whole lifetime. That's the positive. That's the perfect way to get rid of distress. You turn to Krishna. Then Prabhupada says in the end, while a non-devotee is distressed, a devotee welcomes distress as just another feature of God. God appears to us when you get a place of prasadam. You say, oh, that's Krishna's mercy. When you get a sanais, you say to him, that's Krishna's mercy. How can you say such a thing? It's also Krishna's mercy to tame the tiger, you see? And so then he says, Sarvam Kalvidam Brahma. A devotee can actually see that there's only God and no second entity. There's only one living entity. In the whole world, spiritual or material, there's only one living entity, namely Krishna. And everybody else and everything else are extensions of him. Just like the finger is only a finger if you can scratch my head or poke my nose. If it's separate, it's just, what is it? So it will rot away within hours. So there's only one living being and we are all his parts and parcel. Now, I've never heard such a thing in church. One being. One God, not two, like Christians believe. Jesus is God, not two. There's only one, and that's Krishna. And Krishna consciousness means to become Krishna conscious, become conscious of Krishna. And I thank you very much. I hope this helped you, put you a little bit on the track. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Go Premananda Hari Hari Bol. Thank you very much. Nice talking to you. Congratulations to all of you that you ended up here in the Hare Krishna movement. That is very special. Not everybody is allowed to enter here. You have to have some qualifications. Bhagavan Jiva, it says, the fortunate soul comes to Krishna. He calls us, you know. And less unfortunate people, they can't come, you know. They can't come. I invited some policemen here. There was a marriage or something, and the policeman came and asked me a question, what is going on here? He said, you come inside. I said, he really? So he looked inside. He said, he looked at the day, he said, it's all very strange here. He said, was es nicht alles gibt in Niederbayern? Was es nicht alles gibt in Niederbayern? You know? He saw the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he thought, the priest thought it was a cat. As far as cat is concerned, this is my last nice story about Prabhupada. I'm sitting in what is this park called in San Francisco, this big park, whatever, I don't remember now, this big gigantic park where Prabhupada was singing the Hare Krishna mantra the first time with all the hippies. Golden Gate Park in San Francisco. And I was sitting right a couple hundred yards away. I was chanting and looking at this hill, and that's where it all started. And so an old black homeless person came. He was pushing a shopping cart with all his belongings, right? And he looked at me like this, you know. He stopped. And I got a little worried, you know. I said, what's going to be the next? He said, that guy, he said, who pulled this off, this Hare Krishna, he said he was a cool cat, which is a high praise, the highest praise in the black community.